Okay, I think I'm recording. All right, so again, the reason why we have 3 laptops is because, one, I'm trying to show a video today during class to make it more interesting because, again, the topic is kind of dry. The second is for the PowerPoint because the same computer with the PowerPoint doesn't have internet, unfortunately. And then the third is to actually record the class for today. Again, please take advantage of the opportunity. I know we are meeting face-to-face. If there is a topic that comes up in class that you can't recall right off the top of your head, please feel free to click on the video. Did anyone click on the video from last week, or at least see if it's available? Okay, we'll go ahead whenever you get a chance to at least make sure it's working. I want to make sure it's working for all of you, in addition to the online students.
It wouldn't play for me.
It wouldn't play for you?
I tried twice and it wouldn't play for me.
So did you actually see the video, the picture of the video at least?
No, it just was a blank screen and it said, I forget, it said unavailable off air or something, but it wouldn't come on.
Was it on your laptop or phone? Phone? Okay.
Yeah, because where I live at, I haven't gotten internet yet. So I'm kind of like in
strange.
between a rock and a hard place.
Okay.
So I can go and try it now while I'm here.
Yeah, it's just whenever you get a chance, go ahead and try to make sure at least you can access the videos. I want to make sure the media I am using is working for everyone. I haven't heard any feedback about whether or not they get online. I'm assuming everyone can access it. If not, please let me know. Okay? All right, so again, the topic for this week is pharmacotherapy. This is used a lot since the pharmaceuticals, the medications used in substance abuse is increasing. So let's take a look at the video with, actually, I'll take the lens. Okay.
May have heard this buzzword lately. There's been much talk in the field amongst believers and disbelievers of science, specifically neurotransmitter testing and the treatment of addiction. So today we will explore the science behind neurotransmitter testing. I'm your host, Suzanne, and this is Bridgeway to Recovery. My guest today is Dr. Phil Henry, who's the Chief Science Officer of Neurogistics. Dr. Henry received his PhD in counseling and psychology from Temple University in Philadelphia. He is a licensed psychologist and in his practice utilizes a holistic approach that in counseling, neurotransmitter testing, nutrition, neuroscience, and exercise. Welcome, Dr. Henry.
Suzanne, nice to be here today.
So great to have you. So neurotransmitter testing, it's the latest buzz, people are talking about it, but what is it?
It's kind of like the iPad, actually.
Oh.
Well, the iPad is pretty new in terms of, well, not real new, but it was a jump from the way we used to do things. I don't know if you remember the CDs it used to have.
Yes.
And we had tons of CDs, and I had piles of them, couldn't keep track of them. And then when we got the iPod and the iPad, it was a jump to doing things a completely different way. I think that's what the neurotransmitter testing is. It's a way that we will probably do things in 5 or 10 years, and it's just beginning to happen.
So what is a neurotransmitter in layman's terms?
Neurotransmitters are the gas and the brakes of the brain. It's the way the brain works. So all of us have inside a little engine that runs in our brain, and we all have brakes in our brain that slow things down. And usually addiction is connected to either making the engine run really fast or making the brakes go on really hard. But most people have either go too quick or too slow. So we're looking for balance. And the way we can do that sometimes is test the neurotransmitters, see whether we're going too quick or too slow, and sort of balance that out.
So do people have an unlimited supply of neurotransmitters, or are there specific ones that affect the disease of addiction?
Well, we all have different amounts. We actually get them from food, interestingly enough. All of our neurotransmitters are made from amino acids, mostly proteins, and they're in common foods that we eat. Our body breaks them down at a different rate, but we often have these imbalances for birth. And it's sad, I have to tell you, I talked to a family with a 16-year-old. She's cutting herself, she's crying in the shower. I think she's very low on serotonin. Serotonin is one of our main neurotransmitters. And you can have that imbalance, and people who feel that imbalance feel desperate, they feel sad, they may cut themselves or do other things because they're so low. And we haven't previously known how to test for that. And I think we're just beginning to do that, which is exciting to me because then you can help somebody and find out where they're low and get them to do it.
So the old adage, we are what we eat, really is true?
It is true in a simplistic way. Our bodies take those raw materials and make something out of them. So we have to start with the raw materials, but we all have parents, and those parents usually give us good things and bad. Sometimes they give us depression and anxiety, which we don't ask for necessarily.
Right.
Or attention deficit. I have a little attention deficit disorder, and I didn't ask for it necessarily, but I get it passed down to me.
Right.
So I have that, and those imbalances in the neurotransmitters actually set our mood and change our mood, and they're affected by how we eat and what we eat. But also, for some of us, it's a little more difficult just to eat. We'd have to eat tons and tons and tons of food in order to change certain things.
So, I mean, as you're speaking, I mean, this could be revolutionary to the field. I mean, this could have a huge impact on the industry and the nature of us helping people get better.
I worked and researched for clozaril and risperidol, 2 drugs, antipsychotic medications. I got a PhD in psychology. I have an MDiv in theology, and I was been seeking really how to help people. And when I started doing the neurotransmitter testing, I kind of just really got into it because I was very excited that now we might be able to help some people who I think before this we weren't able to help.
So tell us, how does the testing take place? What does it involve?
Well, the testing is actually pretty simple. Everything in your body, all your liquid in your body, everything goes to your kidneys. So all your neurotransmitters and everything go through the kidneys. And so the excretion of those values tell you how your body is using it. Sort of like the exhaust on a car can tell you how much you're burning up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It gives you some idea of the things that you're, the way that you're burning. And from those values, we can extract sort of what you're using the most of, what you're using the least of, and then we can tune the engine a little bit.
Wow, so this can be used for many things, not just addiction, as you said, ADHD.
I have somebody who actually is diagnosed with Alzheimer's and with dementia, and I have them on some precursors. These are not, the difference between herb supplements and some of these supplements are actually neurotransmitters, or they're precursors of neurotransmitters, which are chemicals in your body that actually make the neurotransmitters. And if you give them, you can make the neurotransmitters. So I have somebody actually with dementia who's functioning very well right now, given certain supplements. Now, it's not the supplements that do it. It's knowing the target. I had a guy come in and he says, I'm tired of taking so many supplements.
Right.
And so his wife is interested in helping him. He has some form of dementia. And so she was just giving him, every time there was a study, she was giving him supplements. So he was taking like 30-some supplements.
Wow.
Like just, you know,
Self-medicating.
blueberry extract increases brain cells. So I get blueberry extract. Okay, that's great. You know, ginkgo biloba, oh, that's great.
Right.
But when we did the testing on him, we found that some of the stuff he was taking was actually hurting him. When we narrowed in and gave him exactly what he needed, he quit drinking within a month, got a part-time job, and a lot of his dementia symptoms went away.
Wow. Now, how long does someone stay on the treatment, or do they take these supplements for life? How long a process
Well,
is it?
if you build things up, you can actually take less, which is interesting. It's the opposite of drugs. Most people don't know this, that if you're on an SSRI, Paxil, Zoloft, any of those, one of the reasons why it may not work is you may not have any serotonin to be released, to keep from being uptake. And the problem with that is, it's like a bank account. If you don't have serotonin in the bank, you can't write a check for it. So you write a Paxil check for $500 and you only have 5-HTP or 50 of the serotonin in your bank. The problem with that is you can't take it out then. But if you build that up over time,
You have something to withdraw.
you have something to withdraw from. And that's sort of the holistic idea. Find out where you're low and build it up. And find out the things that are high, bring them down a little so you have a tune.
How does this sort of treatment and philosophy and testing combine with counseling?
Well, I think that it's like medication. I'm not opposed to medication. I think if you're having a heart attack, the time for eating well and exercising is probably past. you should probably go to the hospital and, get yourself, so I don't think medication is bad, but the way it fits in with it, it allows the brain to calm down so that you can do the work of therapy. I would think it's like a computer. You have your hardware and you have your software. Once you have the hardware fixed, you still have to put the software on there, you know what I mean? But it allows the person to slow down enough so that they're not so sad that they can't think, or they're so, usually when a person comes off of different drugs, their adrenals go really high. What does that mean? Their heart races a lot, they're very anxious. Almost everybody who comes off medication is anxious. So you get the anxiety down, you get the depression down, well then the person can think.
So it gives you a baseline so that then you can start to build skills and foundations upon that.
Exactly, because I think recovery is not about getting away from drugs. Recovery is about getting a life.
Absolutely, the lifestyle, right?
It's a lifestyle. So you're trying to, and this supports a foundation of, I can think clearly, I can sleep, I can eat. If I can do those things, then I can have a real life.
And I can function and thrive, not just function, because many of them, they feel as if they're functioning on the drug, but they can thrive, they can excel.
Now, this is the saddest thing. Some people actually look better on the drug than they do without the drug. So you tell them drugs are bad, and they go, right? But they know that they're actually functioning better on the drug because they're so anxious that they can't think, right? Well, they smoke pot, and what happens? It turns off your emotions, and now, oh my gosh, I can think, and I don't have anxiety, and I don't have panic. But you tell me that's bad.
Right.
That's a bad thing to do, and I know, okay, that's bad. But I experience panic and all these things.
And that perhaps is one of the hardest things to lead someone into recovery from, because they think, like, all the stuff you're telling me about doesn't feel so good compared to what I'm getting right now.
They kind of go like, I don't know if you really know what you're talking about. You're telling me it's better, but from my experience,
Sure doesn't feel better.
I can't sleep, I'm nervous, I'm hyper.
So tell me about Neurogistics, the company. We have about 2 minutes left. Give us a quick, how does someone get in touch with Neurogistics? What can you do for them?
Well, Neurogistics, you can go to www.neurogistics.com. It's NEUROGISTICS, neurogistics.com. And you can order yourself a test. The test kits cost about $200. I'm kind of excited about that because I know SPECT scans and some of the other things I've done with people are about $1,400 or $1,500, which is pretty expensive for the average person. So about $199, you get the report back, and it has not only here's your levels, but here are the things you can do to balance that out, which I'm kind of excited by.
I love hearing that. Well, Dr. Henry, thank you so much for bringing this service to our community. Thank you so much for the work you do in the research of the service. And thank you so much for all the help that you provide to people who feel like there may be no other option for help. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much.
Dr. Henry has taught for the last 13 years in the graduate counseling program of Palm Beach Electric University. I'm your host, Suzanne, and this is Bridgeway to Recovery.
All right. Would you mind handing the lights for me, please? Okay. What are your thoughts? Need more.
It's definitely,
Neurogistics, yes, it may look familiar. One of our readings from earlier this semester was from that website. So this website was introduced to me
Professor, which page is that video on? Is that on the week 12? The one you're talking about that we should be able to bring up? Is that on week 12?
should be week 12. So Neurogistics was introduced to me actually by this professor. It's a really, really interesting website, and I think it provides a lot of interesting discussion. What do you think overall with the theory behind it? It's one of the theories I don't think we've actually read in the book. He did mention that it was a cutting edge idea. It's almost like the iPad in regards to technology.
Yeah, but
Agree or disagree, and why?
how reliable is it validity-wise? Is it stable? Will it stand up to rigorous testing? And is it consistent in the results? And, I mean, it's fine to have a great idea, but if the idea doesn't work, then
I like your thought. So what is the research? Is it empirically validated? Is it evidence-based research? What is another idea? Let's think rationally, critically, like a clinician. In this case, if you all will graduate this program and were asked this by me, your pretend supervisor, about the pros and cons, thinking critically about it, what would you say? In addition to what Oliver just mentioned.
I would say that many studies have been done that improve, treatment for brain disorders. People, like scholars, are talking about implementing something in your brain that if you like weak in some subject at school, like statistics.
Yes, yes.
It's like kind of target that part of your brain, and that will be easier for you to learn. So I found that very interesting.
Okay.
Like in 5-10 years, like we might not need certain things. So what he's saying now is like it's target the problem.
Okay.
And I think it's fantastic.
So it seems to be targeting the problem. So that's one of the pros, or one of the positives from it. It seems to really match some of the research or readings we've read so far in the class. So we have one con, one pro. What are some others? Pros and cons.
I like the fact that he talked about different types of vitamins and other things that you can have that can help your neurons and your fluids that your body produces through your liver. I like hearing that. He connected along with the psychology.
Okay, so that makes sense, right? And at least he's getting into the physical part of it and explaining the physical process of how the amino acids are examined or evaluated. How do I know that this guy is not trying to rip me off? How do I know that this isn't just some gimmick?
and they gave his credentials.
He gave his credentials, okay. Which were what?
He's professor at PBC or something to that effect. He's a licensed psychologist. You can look at his licensing credentials.
Okay, so as long as I get a PhD from some really good school, I can then have a license to
Become a
rip you
psychologist.
off?
It has to be based on scientific experiment, right?
Okay, there we go. So it has to be based on some scientific experiment.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I mentioned that is if I go to Harvard and I get my PhD in psychology and then come up with the idea of, hey, listen, maybe if I convince people that using amino acids through my program, paying me that money is a more effective way than evidence-based practices of pharmacotherapy, which is what our chapter is on tonight, I can make a lot of money, right? Because I'm referring to just my authority. Oh, how do I know it's valid? Because I went to Harvard. Okay, well, that's good. How do we know
But
that's
something like that would be evaluated by his peers. There would be a journal on it.
Okay, so maybe journal peer evaluations. Okay, all right, I like the sound of that.
Anything that would validate his work.
You have another test that's being developed in the market. It costs double or more than what he's charging. So he makes the test to evaluate if you really need. So
Okay. These are good thoughts. I really my goal is to have you think. I really want you to think about it, right? We don't know the answers to all the questions I'm asking you. I don't know all the answers to the questions I'm asking you. I do think it is worthwhile, though, to really listen and to look more into regarding the website, logistics, science behind it, the research behind it. Are there any journal peer reviews about it? Are there any competitors? Is anyone else really doing this in the field? Neurogistix the only one?
I also, it's a comment, but it's also accompanied with a question. Because he mentioned genetics, right? Because we inherit certain things from our parents, including some of these neurotransmitters are high or low or so on. So you also start with that, and then you can, based on what he said, you can kind of either make it higher or lower based on what you, based on your evaluation. But also, I think your brain, because the brain is shaped by not only our neurotransmitters, but also our experiences.
Exactly.
So it's like, there's other factors to take into consideration too.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So I want you to do exactly what you're doing now, which is to become the master of questioning, to really think critically about a topic. So I just gave you a lot of new information, which is oftentimes what happens in the counseling session. The client will give you or provide a lot of new information within a short period of time, and it's your job to really master questioning and really thinking critically about the material provided. So if we were to think about what was just provided to us and think critically about it, we would look, like what you already mentioned, are there any evidence-based research journals done on it? Are there any competitors in the market? When Dr. Henry mentions that it's the opposite of current medications in that current medications you have to take more eventually because it depletes your neurotransmitters, whereas this neurogistix concept builds your neurotransmitters to where you eventually decrease the amount you need over time, which is the opposite, right? You need more medication as time goes on right now, but if you take amino acids, you'll actually build your neurotransmitters to where you'll need less in the future. How does that interact with relationships? Will you need to increase the amino acids when maybe you go through a stressful situation, a divorce, a death? Maybe you are not doing well in school. Maybe there are these external factors, your environment, that play a critical role in your actual neurotransmitter levels. So it's really interesting. Again, I don't expect you to have answers to the questions that I'm asking you, but merely to think critically about it. That's the important part. Again, at the end of the day, when you are the counselor with the client will be the one who needs to answer a lot of the questions that you ask. Make sense?
It makes great sense, and I think if it's all true, what he's saying will be of a great benefit. So the professional psychiatrist will not give unnecessary medicine for the person. Maybe like.
Are we talking about serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SRIs?
Maybe the amount maybe it's too much or maybe it's too little. It's not giving effect.
Yes. Yes.
Or maybe who knows? Maybe it's a misdiagnosed and it's taking something that it doesn't need and it's making it even worse.
Yes.
Yeah, he even mentioned that one of his clients, I don't think it was one of his clients, but someone who had was it Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's, yeah.
And his wife would read research and give him a bunch of supplements. And some of the supplements he was taking was actually harming him. So.
Correct. Yes. It's a really revolutionary idea. I really like the fact that you could potentially measure the amount of neurotransmitters in your brain. We talk about neurotransmitters in here. We'll be talking a lot more about them tonight. We talk about synapses. We talk about making connections in your brain. And if we could actually measure that occurring or not occurring in your brain, it's pretty revolutionary. So I hope you all run with it, look into it, learn more about it, and see what you think. All right. So with that, let me try and get the PowerPoint up on the screen here. All right. Okay, so we're going over chapter, anybody remember? 11. So basically looking at the pharmaceutical side of substance abuse treatment. So the rationale for the chapter is pharmacotherapy approaches are increasing in the field. So pharmacotherapy, whenever you think about that, is the study of pharmacology. So we have excuse me, when you think of the pharmacy, the farm, the root stem of the word farm refers to just some medications that we're going to be talking about a little tonight. Sometimes controversial because it can be called or viewed as a crutch, anti-medication bias. There is a strong anti-medication bias in the substance abuse field because why, do you think? If your client is really opposed to using medication, why do you think that might be the case? Okay, let's say I'm the client, you all are the counselor. I meet with you for a few weeks. It's now the 4th session. You determine, based on your clinical judgment and experience, that I have an anxiety disorder. So you recommend that I see a psychiatrist. There's a psychiatrist perhaps in the same private practice or right next door or at the same facility. So I go meet with the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist then prescribes or recommends the prescription Xanax. I then bring the Xanax prescription to you, my counselor, and I say, I do not want to take any prescription medication. I'm afraid I will abuse Xanax.
Well, because it's a drug.
It is a drug.
And they're probably already.
Perhaps I was abusing Xanax. Maybe that's why. Or perhaps I was an alcoholic and I'm afraid that I may transfer addictions now that I've been clean and sober for a few weeks. Right? So again, there is this really strong emphasis on being very cautious with medication, but it doesn't necessarily restrict a client from needing to take medication. So again, this is why people can view it as a crutch. You're not really getting better because you're referring to medication. You're not really using your coping skills because you have to use these chemicals. Right. Perhaps you're trying to cure the symptom versus the core root of the problem. Again, it's really controversial, but it really does come down to your clinical judgment, your clinical experience as the counselor. That's why we want to start mastering the skill of critical thinking now versus later, because the more able you are to think critically about a topic, about new pieces of information presented to you, the better and more effective you can be in the long run. So if I were to ask you, now being the client's parent, the client was underage of a 17-year-old male. I am now the parent of that 17-year-old client male who you just met with for weeks, and I say, listen, I really think you are right. I think the psychiatrist is right in prescribing him Xanax. He doesn't want to take it. What's your recommendation? How do we go about with this?
Can you try alternative medicine first?
Like what?
Something natural, and also do some exercising, that will increase dopamine in your brain and see the result of it.
Okay, so alternative approaches to try and manage Xanax or manage anxiety versus taking Xanax. Okay, that's one approach. What's another one?
I would ask a particular type of diet and exercise.
Okay. Okay, diet and exercise.
And exercise.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. That's
After
another way.
listening to the other professor, that kind of.
Measure what's going on with the person now and how he could be taking the medicine.
Okay, what do you mean?
By taking the medicine, I really work with him and bring good results, and after that he can choose, because there is always a way to come out of the medicine. Right?
Okay, I think I understand. So you're basically monitoring him really
Yeah.
closely, taking the medicine?
Yeah, and see the
Okay.
result, to see if it's working.
See if it actually
and
helps.
focus-
Okay.
Focusing better, or is stopping your drugs.
Give him a pseudo. I'm
Okay.
probably not saying the word right, but.
A placebo? Yes, okay.
Something
I like
to
where you're
make you
headed.
think.
So I like these thoughts because you're thinking creatively. You're thinking critically outside the box, which is really good. I think a placebo might be unethical. But again, I really like where you're headed with that, because I think all of these suggestions are really good in that you're thinking outside the box. This happens all the time in substance abuse treatment. This is very common. A lot of times you can have different, maybe non-stimulant medication. So perhaps alternative treatment instead of Xanax could be something similar to Xanax, but it has a non-addictive element to it. Perhaps we would look into neurogistics. Maybe we would look into amino acid therapy, because that's what neurogistics really comes to, at the end of the day, comes down to, which is amino acid therapy. Perhaps we recommend exercise, changing your diet. Perhaps we recommend trying Xanax for a certain period of time. Let's say that we try it out for 6 weeks, but we're closely monitoring it. He doesn't take it himself. Perhaps I, as the parent, right, I'm role playing as a parent, the parent is in charge of prescribing and providing the medication, hey, so that way he doesn't have even the opportunity or potential to abuse it. Perhaps we increase the therapy sessions to 2 times a week to really monitor him, to give him that additional support. Should it trigger any cravings, because maybe it's reminiscent of feelings he used to get when abusing alcohol or any other type of medication. So it really comes down to a variety of options, and at the end of the day, it's going to have to be up to you, the client, and client's parent in this example, to make a collaborative decision and really just laying out all the options. But it's going to be really important for you as a counselor to point out those options. Make sense?
Is it like, I guess the bottom line is that a psychiatrist is the one that has to go through the whole prescribing of any type of pharmaceuticals for mental patients?
Correct. Psychiatrists are the only ones who can prescribe medication. You cannot prescribe medication. Typically, you have a very close working relationship with psychiatrists. Oftentimes, when you work in a treatment facility, there are several psychiatrists there. They're, I think, all mandated to have psychiatrists. And you have a working relationship with psychiatrists. They're going to be your treatment teams.
Counselors who can't make that kind of recommendation, like, hey,
You have to go to medical school.
Counselors cannot make the recommendation directly to the client. They can make a recommendation to the psychiatrist. They oftentimes report to the psychiatrist the behavioral symptoms, because the psychiatrist doesn't always have time to sit with the client. Ideally, they would have time to sit with the client just as much as the therapist, but that, unfortunately, is oftentimes not the case. The therapist would meet with the psychiatrist, or usually the psychiatrist asks for your feedback. Hey, what do you see? What are the strengths? What are the trends? What are the behavioral patterns? What's the level of anxiety? Do you see any underlying motivations for X, Y, and Z? It really is important. Again, that's very typical no matter where you work, whether it's a private practice or in a treatment facility. Yeah.
Does the counselor deliver any type of assessment to the psychiatrist?
All the time, yes. Oh, yes. So the psychiatrist will ask for an assessment by the psychologist or from the therapist almost 99% of the time.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So we have an ethical mandate to offer evidence-based treatment to clients. Again, there is a lot of evidence supporting medication, so pharmacopsychotherapy along with therapy, emotional therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, whatever approach you choose as a therapist. But the ideal practice is to have both. Terms and concepts, 38 key pharmacotherapy terms: addiction, agonist, antagonist, neurotransmitter, receptor, reuptake. Again, we've reviewed some of these terms earlier in the semester. Neurotransmitter means what?
Chemical messenger.
Chemical messenger, yes. As the video put it, that's the gas or the brakes in the brain. Right? It can speed up or slow down the processes in your brain. The 3 parts of the synapse. What is the synapse again?
Synapse is a tree.
It's like a gap between the neurons.
Yeah, it's basically a gap between the neurons, and then we want to use the neurotransmitters to send messages to each other to make connections, right? So presynaptic membrane of one neuron controls neurotransmitter release. Postsynaptic membrane of receiving neuron facilitates intracellular response. minute space between the two called the synaptic cleft. The neurology of the synapse. So the axon of the nerve cell is located here. We have the neurotransmitters basically are these small little dots you see in the circle as well as in the synapse, because the neurotransmitters are the messengers. So you will see them throughout because they're trying to communicate with one another, communicate from the nerve cells through the synapse and to the receptors. Oh, you can you see my mouse? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it?
Oh, the mouse, no.
No. Okay.
The
So-
other ones in there?
The neurotransmitters are here, these small little dots you see, and they're going to be in the circle as in the nerve cell as well as in this space here, the synapse, because they want to communicate. The receptors receive messages from the neurotransmitters